find a special key. So thank you for coming aboard today. Before we set sail, we'll start with quick intros. So my name is Claire, and I'm the COO at SI Delivery Consulting, and I get to build operations and strategy for our sales, marketing, and HR functions. Much of what we'll cover today has been informed by key takeaways from numerous books. And if you're a pirate book nerd like Kevin and I, you'll want to check out the Miro board link to the right here. Outside work, I have 2 kids, 3 and 7, who have boundless energy and a low-key obsession with Baby Shark.
Boy, my name is Kevin. My work background is mostly in large government system transformation efforts, about half of that time with Accenture as a delivery practitioner in those environments, the other half of that time as an independent consultant working on behalf of states navigating those environments. I'm the Chief Value Officer at SI Delivery Consulting, and I focus on the value and outcome delivery for our clients in the state government space. Outside of work, I have 2 kids, 14 and 16. My 16-year-old son is a competitive gymnast, so we spend a lot of time traveling around, going to meets. And my 14-year-old daughter is a tennis player and aspiring author. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll dive in by sharing a little bit more background on who we are as a company. At SI Delivery Consulting, we are on a mission to make the world a better place by shifting the current mindset around transformation strategy in government environments to one that drives better value and tangible outcomes for customers and citizens. Our emphasis on transformation strategy really stems from the firsthand experience that we have with large-scale transformation efforts that are happening in these environments that often fall short of outcome expectations or even worse, fail. And our hypothesis is that we could shift to a clear, effective strategy away from some of the traditional methods that are being employed and could have a significant positive impact. Our vision is really to start small, experiment, show success, all the agile things that I'm sure the folks in this room are also interested in, prove out results to create that market for good strategy in these environments. And we incorporate a hands-on learning experience with our government system transformations, and we build in tandem with our customers.
And final plug, we're actually building out a community of practice for mission-driven, talented individuals to really engage in conversations, much like we'll be having today. If you're at all interested in learning more, please reach out to me directly. So speaking of, what are we doing today? We're going to go on a treasure hunt, and we're going to traverse 2 frameworks and work models labeled with green icons. Now, we believe such models hold the key to simplifying complexity, foster shared understanding, and enable effective communication within teams and across organizations. What we cover today is an evolving effort, like Kevin said, but especially as it applies to our work with state governments. But we really believe that the proposed concepts can be taken back to your own ecosystems, teams, and environments. We have 2 primary goals for today's presentation. The first, that these novel models help you name the type of work you do and also inform the context in which it applies. And second, to spark your curiosity for ongoing engagement with these topics and arm you with the tools needed to explore further. Finally, this board is yours, so feel free to share it, link to it, come back, give us feedback, and really digest this at your own pace. Now, we believe in the power of community, and we're going to mosey on over for a quick welcome activity that allows us to stay connected after today. We're going to practice using the Miro board. So please find a sticky note and add your name, your LinkedIn profile link or company website, and your pirate name. See the graphic to the right and find out what you'll be called on the high seas. For what it's worth, I'm Squid Lips Tuna Breath. So that obviously commands respect. That's pretty sweet. But we'll give you just a minute to do this. We're going to head over to our treasure map now. I hope you enjoy your pirate name moniker for the remainder of the day. And oh goodness, there we go.
Yeah, go. Thank you for facilitating that, Squid Lips. After that activity, I guess I should reintroduce myself as well. I be Scallywag Chum Bucket apparently, so that's me now. I'll introduce you to our treasure map, which has a whole lot of rich content on here. There's tons of video links, blog posts, stops on the map that we won't actually be covering today. like the Agile tar pits that go into some common challenges with Agile transformations and working in an Agile way or product manner. Cynefin's on there, and we've got 3 novel execution models at the top right to explore as well that all have videos and explanation to them. And since this format doesn't lend super well to doing a whole lot of workshopping, we've included gray feedback boxes at each stop. So if there's thoughts or feedback or things you want to throw in there, feel free to add those to the map as you'd like. If you're interested in discussion or feedback, feel free to leave your name and email on those comments and we can follow up with you on them. The first stop in the model or in the map is what we refer to as the arts model. These arts are an intentionally simplified and high-level manner of thinking about some common terms that we have that capture the why of the terms rather than getting caught up in some of the definitions or how they should be done. It gives us an alternative way to think about these terms that have been defined and discussed extensively in different ways. The inspiration for the arts model comes from Jennifer Palka. So I'm guessing in a DC area, there might be lots of Jennifer fans. Give me a thumbs up if you have read Recoding America in the past or recently. It's definitely a favorite of ours and something that we've enjoyed in explaining, how we've reached some challenges in government IT environments. For those that do follow her, she often talks about the art of project management and the art of product management. So the art of project management, that art of getting things done, and the art of product management, the art of deciding what to do, and maybe more importantly, what not to do. And we've added several more items to her list, including the art of change management, which we've defined as the art of guiding people to adopt change as if with the energy and enthusiasm as if it were their idea in the first place. The art of strategy, the art of illuminating a clear, actionable, achievable path to a shared vision, and the art of leadership, the art of serving others and supporting others in a manner that inspires them to follow that shared vision. And there are likely many other terms that, excuse me, that would benefit from art definitions. Several actually have already been added by folks adding feedback to the gray boxes below already. So feel free to make comments, add any of your own ideas as well. And as we've reviewed these models with folks, one of the common pieces of feedback I get is that we look at that art of change management definition and think to ourselves, that's not what change management is. And that's a little strange how that's defined. I'm guessing many of you might have the same thought. So I did want to dig into that one a little bit deeper and talk about it in more detail. And again, the goal is to think about these concepts in a little bit of a different light. So if you're a change management person, you're probably familiar with traditional methods for doing change management. It might follow industry leaders like ProSci, use models like ADKAR, Kotter, Kubler-Ross, all good ways of understanding and facilitating change. If you go to the ProSci website, you'll see it defines change management as driving success by preparing, equipping, and supporting individuals to thrive through change, which is admittedly quite different from what you see in the art of definition in this model. But what that definition says to me is that we have a change and we're going to drive people to change and provide tools and methods for how to support them and make it as comfortable as possible. But if you watch a true master, a highly skilled person at the art of change management work their magic, it's often like watching that movie Inception, where they go and quietly plant ideas deep in the subconscious so that people really don't even know where they came from. You'll see them asking carefully crafted questions, take deliberate actions that don't tell people what the change is or ask people to change, but instead lead people to adopt that change as if they were the ones that came up with it in the first place. And that's really what the art of change management that's being described is here. And then something like ProSci is great for providing the steps, the approaches, defining what change management is that will help us achieve this art of change management. It's kind of the what and the how, which might be different from the art. So you might be thinking, cool, how and why would any of this art stuff be useful to me? And that's a great question. I like framing things in this way because it requires us to step back a little bit and think outside the norm and a little bit differently, which can often lead to new ideas and new thinking. But an example that I would say is common, a helpful way to bring in thinking like this comes up in discussion groups that I'm in quite often in Agile discussion forums. I'm guessing many of you have been part of similar discussions on, how do we measure a team's velocity, or story pointing, or metrics for evaluating the performance of teams, or you've heard of or been part of heated debates on people going around in circles on whether we need to move the story points to the next sprint or split them or something. In my experience, those discussions are primarily debates about the art of project management, figuring out how we can measure the things that are getting done and get performance around things getting completed. But if you ask everyone involved in that conversation to take a step back for a second and think about how many of these arts are needed to truly deliver successfully the work that we're trying to accomplish, you will typically get to an answer that we need all of these to achieve a successful result. And it doesn't take much to reach a realization there are much bigger gaps to worry about than the art of project management and potentially other places that require focus, like whether we're doing the right things in the first place, the art of product management, or whether we might fail or not have a lack of adoption because of resistance or lack of understanding, requiring the art of change management, or whether we even understand and are working on the same vision or have the same approach to accomplishing the goals, the art of strategy, or whether we have the necessary support to do the work and autonomy to complete everything that we're doing, the art of leadership. So just one example of how this could be leveraged in conversations to simplify and pull ourselves out of the details a little bit to get back to what really matters. So now that we've covered the arts model at a high level, we want to get some feedback and input from you all and apply this. So in a minute, we're going to pull up a pop-up survey that should take you to the spot in Miro. So fingers crossed on that one. But we're gonna give you 3 votes, and once we hit the start voting button, you'll have one vote could be for the first column in answering the question, which art do you apply the most in the work that you do, based on to think of what you're doing most commonly and which of these arts you feel like you're applying the most. The second question in that second column being which do you feel you're the best at of these arts, which one is your superpower. And then the third question, which is your Achilles heel? Which do you feel like you have the hardest time achieving? Mine is that change management I went into. That's not a skill. I'm bad at planting those subconscious seeds. I want to tell people what the change is. That's my instinct. But so pop up in a second. First column, oh, here it is. 1, which do you apply most? 2, which you're best at? And 3, where do you struggle? All right, looks like we use the art of project management the most out of this group. We are the best at, oh, that's pretty even. Kind of even across the board. And our biggest challenge is product management. Interesting. So just to get any thoughts and feedback on the model or the results you're seeing in front of you, feel free to throw some things in the chat, and we've got time to, if a couple people want to share their thoughts or ask some questions.
I was going to say that it's a great reflection activity, and probably something like a PMO group could do, really to understand like how to leverage strengths within their group. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I was thinking along the same lines, but personally, for me to look and see, okay, so where's some areas that I might need to improve or increase my skills? It's helpful from that vantage point.
Okay, well, thank you for for voting. We'll have a few other opportunities to continue to contribute in that way and in other ways as we move through our board. I can tell that we are getting closer to the key. We've got our next step is called the work types model.
All right, so the proposed work types model we're showing here, it includes 4 different broad types of work. The reason for using this model is similar, to create some differentiation around how we manage work differently in these 4 areas. So we've got governance, operational, strategic, and transformational work that we've split out. And we realize there may be a difference of opinion on whether these should be separated in the first place, but we have found it useful for clarifying in our conversations, especially in these government environments, due to some of the differences in nature between what needs to be done in these different domains and the need to separate that out and name it. And so I'll go through each one briefly here, starting with the governance work. We're using a definition of the work of optimizing the allocation of investment and effort to achieve organizational outcomes. And in my experience, a lot of strategic planning consultants spend a lot of time in this domain. So defining organizational structures, staffing plans, future state enterprise architectures, policies and procedures, those sorts of things. And a lot of time when most people think of governance, they think of hand-wringing meetings, unnecessary standardization, rules, regulations, policies, those sorts of fun activities. In how we've drawn this model, that governance work primarily drives and prioritizes the operational work that happens in that quadrant, and to a smaller extent, some of the strategic work that's going on. And in the definition we're using for that operational work quadrant is the work of maintaining business continuity and providing products and services. By definition, operational work is performed for known customer personas by users working in defined organizational structures, leveraging stable processes and capabilities, and supported by existing stable teams. And whenever we get the conclusion that one of those things is not optimized, it needs to be changed to something else, that usually results in the need to create the new or the activities in that strategic work domain. And we use the strategic work to plan out the transformational work to drive those changes to how the operational work domain is structured. And if we go to the strategic work quadrant, we can zoom in on that. And as we discussed in the beginning of this presentation, our initial company vision really focuses primarily on these bottom two quadrants, strategic and transformational work types. So you'll see in these two quadrants, if you go to the Miro board, tons of different links and content we've created and published around strategic and transformational work domains. But I'll talk about one simple construct that's here. I'm not going to go into all this detail. But one thing that we found extremely helpful in these conversations is Richard Rumelt's framework that he's published in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which goes into three primary components of a good strategy. One being a diagnosis of the challenges that are preventing success. Two, a guiding policy for dealing with those challenges and setting the overall direction. And then three, a coherent action plan that applies the guiding policy, overcoming the challenges and achieving the strategic goal that's intended. And this is a contrast from what we find in most government strategic plans that we run into, and they often fall into that category of bad strategy that Rumelt publishes. Most are comprised of mission statements, visions, long lists of strategic objectives and goals with proposed years-long solution roadmaps. We put a good example of this in the presentation in the IRS Strategic Operating Plan, which my understanding is cost around $15 million to create, produced something that laid out 5 objectives, 42 initiatives, 195 projects, and 199 milestones, really checking all the boxes in Rumelt's bad strategy criteria. And this really isn't something that I would say is unique to the IRS strategic plan. This is what I run into in most strategic plans or strategies that I find. It's a pattern just about everywhere I look in government environments that we come into. So if anyone is aware of examples that are counter to this, where they've seen good strategies being published, I'd love to hear those references. Please feel free to send them on. And I could talk hours on strategy, so I'll move on. But if anyone's interested in going deeper, feel free to check out the links or hit us up for conversation from that. Transformational work is the work of executing that strategy and changes the existing operational constructs that we have in place to something different. So this might be something like adding a new team, replacing an outdated solution with another one, or buying something new, maybe modifying business processes and flows, or just changing staff responsibilities or the organization of how teams are structured and how their reporting lines function, or even transforming ways of working overall. And typical state modernization initiatives that we run into often do all of these things all at once at a very large scale. And a common question that folks have is, around this domain is, why does this need to be separate from the existing work that's happening? Why can't we combine transformational work and operational work and have a single group that does both of these things more seamlessly, right? Which is a great point. The organizations that have figured out how to work very effectively in using products and Agile have usually transitioned to a model that single teams are responsible for all 4 types of these work, which seems to work extremely well. Unfortunately, the environments that we find ourselves in often are not structured that way or set up in a manner that facilitates that and are very siloed. And so trying to shift to a model that allows that to happen is transformational work in itself. And even if we do have a single group of people that are able to seamlessly do all 4 types of work, we still find it helpful to be able to name them and understand how to treat the work that's happening in each domain a little bit differently. And we'll talk about that in the intersection mountains a little bit. But before we go there, we'd like to do another exercise quick to capture some of your experiences with these types of work. So we're hoping folks can think about an activity that you're working on within your organizations right now, and then write that down in the sticky note that corresponds to the category work that you feel it fits into, given these definitions. And we put in an other box if you're unsure, or if maybe you're doing something that fits into all of them. Feel free to use the other category to denote that. I'm noticing there's some questions in here. Difference between a strategy and a goal. That's a good one. And I think the art of strategy is a good way to talk about this as well. When we're looking at that art of strategy, we're really thinking about creating that clear, defined, achievable path to a shared vision. The goal might be one stop on that path, or could be the end goal. I could see being defined in many different layers within a strategy of something we want to achieve that's near term, longer term, farther out term. Goal is very broad term. In the way I think about it, that could be used to define any sort of milestone or objective we want to complete. Strategy being the path and the ability to get people aligned on this series of goals to get to that end state vision. As you're writing, if you're done writing, if you want to share any of the any details about what you're currently working on and how you feel it fits into the definition of that work type, feel free to jump in. Ways of working. Yeah, well, it looks like a lot of agile transformation, shifting how we go about doing work, transforming that. A lot of need for that art of change management in there.
Well, like Kevin said, we'll come back to this because we'll probably have some time for assessing this a little bit further. Thank you for contributing. And look at that. We're really moving on our mountain. We're moving our map to get closer to that key. And as Kevin said, their next stop is really the sum of it all, called the intersection mountains. And this is where we're going to give you a chance to give your opinions on how the work type models intersect the arts models.
And the hypothesis here that we have is that, and the interesting exercise we want to go through with you all, is the assumption that we need different levels of each art in each one of those work types, depending on that type. So we want to hear what you think about that as well. So we're going to do a similar engagement poll in which we'll be capturing which arts we feel are needed for which work type. And we'll pull up a screen that has the definitions as a reference while we're doing it. But think of this as like a dot voting exercise. We'll be giving you 40 total votes. So lots of votes that you can put dots on the items you think are the most important for which work type in each box. You'll be clicking on the boxes. So you should have the definitions on the shared screen and be able to vote on your own browser. Very cool. So, I mean, a few summaries that I'm taking away from all our voting. Leadership was a big category in general. So it looks like across the board, we had a lot of need for leadership. So I think that makes sense. When it comes to, let's see, governance work, leadership, the top voted. Operational work, looks like project management, the top voted. When it comes to strategic work, and it looks like, there were a lot of votes in the strategic work type category in general, leadership being the top and then strategy being second, which is interesting. And then when it comes to transformational work, that art of change management being a huge winner there. So if there are any comments or questions on, or thoughts or observations on this, please feel free to share them. The other thing that we thought would be interesting as a thought exercise for folks is to take a look at the sticky note that when you entered it in the work types and the activity that you put in there as your activity, and think about when you think about the work that you're doing in your environment and the distribution of the arts that are being applied in your environment, and then check that against the distribution that as a group we thought would be appropriate for that, or based on all the voting that came out. And any thoughts people have on just thinking through that and differences or similarities between what you're seeing in your worlds and how you're doing work and how it's applied to these models and what you're seeing on the screen. Anything surprising to folks from what you're seeing on this picture? Leadership bigger than strategy for the strategic work type. Yep, that is interesting. Higher count for project management under operational. And it looks like, yeah, I guess operation, now that I'm looking at it, operational is pretty much even. I guess I didn't notice since the bubbles were so much smaller, but yeah, 14, 13, 11, 11, 12. So pretty flat distribution across that type. That is interesting. Thoughts on leadership over for strategy being the, or for strategic work, leadership being critical? That one also surprises me, I guess. Yeah, I think probably the what Marco's saying is the way I would think about it too, is that leadership is such a critical thing in general. It's the highest rated thing across the board, it seems like. And so that being a factor. Scoring, yeah. So for both project and product management didn't get a whole lot of votes in transformational, which, yeah, I mean, that is surprising to me as well. You need to get stuff done. You need to do the right things.
Still a lot of ambiguity in the Agile community on what transformational is and what the scope of the change needs to be before it goes from being something that you're doing as continuous improvements versus something that you're doing to actually make a transformation within the organization. And I'm curious, do you guys is there a standard that is being used to define the differences between those things that you guys have seen or that you use?
Well, so we're putting a position on that in the work types model. So if you go back to that, Claire, the bullets, and then this is high level, so it's not like it's at a detail level that you might need, but if you're thinking about it, saying that the operational work is when we have known customers, we have defined users, we have a clearly defined organizational model, we have stable business processes, stable products and capabilities, and stable teams. So by definition, anytime the work is changing any one of those things, it's in this model described as transformational work. So, and I don't know if is that helpful to answer what you're saying in terms of a standard for how you would know the difference between the two.
I think that's a good definition and it makes sense and it resonates. I think my question is that something that if we look across our industry, would we all nod and say that that's what the definition is? Because I often hear a wide variety of what people are doing. And again, sometimes I'm listening and I'm like, actually, all you're doing is improving the processes that you're using on a day-to-day basis. You're not really doing a transformation. I like the way that you guys have described this, but I was curious, is this resonate with everybody else as kind of a standard across our industry, or is this something that we're still working to get alignment on?
Right. So a great distinction. So this is what we're presenting you today are things that we found that resonate and are helpful, and that when we use them, people are like, yeah, this makes tons of sense, right? And this is helpful for clarifying and categorizing and naming the things that we're doing so that we can collaborate and work together in a more effective way and have terms for when we're doing something versus something else. Has this been adopted and become a standard that's been used in other places? Not that I'm aware of. So that's part of this conversation is if you find it useful and others find it useful, we continue to talk about it and refine it and improve it with knowledge from other experiences and contexts. And having something like this that people can interact with can start to generate that type of standardization. But we're at the infancy of that when it comes to the things that we're working on, at least. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, completely. This is good.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, our intention is to continue to create, publish, and, have models like this. And, again, there's several other ones in here that we've found helpful, but that are not, like you're saying, they're not standard. They're not something that is published out in the industry working in a way that, others are adopting them yet. But the hope would be we're creating something that in the context that we're talking about is really useful and that others start to find useful as well. And that we have continued momentum and engagement on thinking about things in a little bit different way to define and simplify some of these conversations that, in my opinion, continue to just swirl around in a circle until you put terms that are helpful for getting to clarity.
I'll tell you what, we actually have a few minutes here before we wrap up our pirate map and getting the treasure. So maybe a few more minutes of Q&A if there are any other questions that are top of mind for folks before we conclude.
Great questions and comments so far, so thank you.
I think my other question is, where do we go? So I feel like I'm a bit of on an island where I do this all the time, and I very seldom get to run into folks that are doing the same thing or doing something similar, to just have a group of folks that are communicating. And I know, Claire, I think earlier you said, if you're interested, please let you know. I have let you know. If anybody else has any places that they go to meet up with folks that are dealing with transformations and things like that, I would love to hear where you guys are going, or how do you stay current on what's going on? What types of conferences and things do you guys stay and listen to, so that you can stay bleeding edge and stay current in your practice?
For bringing back the community of practice that we're building to do that exact thing. So if anyone else has interest in continuing not just conversations about what we talked about today, but building out a broader community where we really dig in and then continue to evolve it, email me and we'll get you a part of this community of practice. But certainly, Reba, thank you for mentioning that.
And I would say that's kind of been my experience as well. I share the experience that I'm hearing from you, which is, there's this work that's a little bit different than what we're seeing in a lot of places, and there aren't a lot of people that are talking about it and how to do it better. And so we're trying to create that community in these transformational environments that aren't ready for transformation, right? And then there's different ways to deal with those environments than what we see out there in other groups or conferences. And yeah, so I would say that this is like the domain of work that we spend our time in is not something that has a whole lot of existing examples of how to do it in the most effective manner, and we're trying to build a lot of that, or find someone that's solved the problem, right? So if there's someone out there that's been in these environments and created great ways to address them, we're definitely interested in learning and discovering what's worked in other places. Going to add on that, my experience has been continued, especially in government large transformation efforts, is the experiences that are happening are not working in the way that when we go to the Agile conference, we hear about all the great things that work in these, in using these Agile methodologies and using these different approaches. It's not the experience that I encounter when I am involved in the actual transformation work, especially in governments, but also in industries that may be highly regulated or structured in a way that's not suited to that approach. So having tools and language for dealing with those situations seems important.
Say thank you again. We found the key, and we hope that you can see how both of these models talked about today can help simplify complexity, really foster shared understanding, and enable effective communications within teams and across the organizations that you get to work at. Now, if you'd like, in addition to the community of practice that we talked about already, feel free to reach out to us and continue conversations both in the Miro board and outside of the Miro board, either on our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and you can email us directly. But thank you so much for coming on board today for our pirate journey. We hope that you learned some things. We certainly did as well. Thank you for your patience with a few of the Miro things, but we're hoping that you can take this back and continue to work in there and interact with what we've brought today. So thank you again.